The power of nostalgia should not be understated. It seems as though it is common for the average person you encounter to, in some degree, be a self-proclaimed nostalgic. The word is in common parlance. People will explode with excitement when their favorite game, movie, or show from their childhood is mentioned. There are mountains of both official and user-made nostalgic music of X-decade playlists on the rapacious, culture-destroying app Spotify, and the continued prevalence and popularity of stories told that borrow their settings from moments past for the express reason of evoking a nebulous vibe of a defunct era. Nostalgia is a symptom throughout history of the current moment being entirely too painful to continuously endure, an individual's moment or on a wider societal scale. The power of nostalgia comes from this pain, a strong yearning for a time away from the current moment that opens avenues towards several potentialities, constructive and deconstructive. Yearning can work as an engine, propelling and giving energy to people to make reality better. But when one's eyes are fixated towards the past, that energy almost assuredly fails to reach the present or the future. And pain can easily be instrumentalized. The term nostalgia first appeared as a malaise that needed treatment, painful yearning that required cure. A 1688 dissertation from Johannes Hofer introduced the term in a manner that neglected temporal displacement, and focused fully on nostalgia as a sort of homesickness that was to be treated with opium to calm worries, mercury to purge residue resulting from the disease out of the stomach, and the best cure being a return to one's home or homeland. In the realm of nostalgia as a sickness, writer Susan Stewart, in her book On Longing, calls the phenomenon a social disease, writing wholly about nostalgia's relation with the past, or, more truthfully, the lack thereof. Nostalgia as a ideological narrative written by the subject. Nostalgia is a sadness without an object, a sadness which creates a longing that, out of necessity, is inauthentic because it does not take part in lived experience. Rather, it remains behind and before that experience. Nostalgia is a yearn for an image of the past, not a true object representing genuine history. Christopher Lack's The True and Only Heaven seems to challenge the common contemporary use of the word nostalgia in contrast to simple memory, writing, "Strictly speaking, nostalgia does not entail the exercise of memory at all, since the past it idealizes stands outside time, frozen in unchanging perfection. Memory too may idealize the past, but not in order to condemn the present. It draws hope and comfort from the past in order to enrich the present and to face what comes with good cheer. It sees past, present, and future as continuous. It is less concerned with loss than with our continuing indebtedness to the past, the formative influence of which lives on in our patterns of speech, our gestures, our standards of honor, our expectations, our basic disposition toward the world around us. It seems to me that today's use of nostalgia refers more to remembering the past rather than the characteristic ache for that past. Memory has a multitude of unambiguous uses, but nostalgia can easily fall into masturbatory melancholia, let alone the threat of something worse. Still, it cannot be waved away as a useless, destructive emotion. In Jane L. Wilson's Nostalgia, Sanctuary of Meaning, she posits a positive view of nostalgia, one example stating, "Nostalgia is between the head and the heart. It is both cerebral and visceral. The head knows that what is being fondly remembered wasn't really that way, but the heart finds comfort in the feeling. Nostalgia realigns cognition and emotion to produce comfort and security. A worthwhile cognitive function, then, a willing self-deception of what the past was in order to draw comfort to the present. Maybe it is the friction of this duplicity that brings about trouble, when there is a failure of the mind realizing that the heart embellishes the past, or maybe the voluntary, decided submission to soothing falsehoods. The horror of nostalgia is one of stolen, corrupted memory, or even the implantation of false pasts. It is defilement of the mind, the corruption of ideals invading one's search for comfort in what is gone. It is preying on a precarious emotional response, turning the pensive yearning of nostalgia into pure pain, and then offering a cure, a return to a home that never existed, built by malicious hands. Nostalgia is an emotion that can easily become harmful to both individual and society, creating a detrimental connection with the past and rebuking the connection to the all-important now. To make it clear, the common perception of nostalgia, appearing to be, in actuality, merely memory, is not what is being discussed. but rather the more solid understanding of nostalgia as a sadness-tinged longing for a lost, static, and idealized past. That's not to say that the two do not have overlap, or that nostalgia doesn't hide like a predator in wait within the thicket of memory, but that simply reminiscing on years past doesn't belie a pitfall. It is when one becomes entranced by the past, believing wholeheartedly that their fallible memory of what once was is better than what is, or ever could be. This essay looks at period pieces, what Frederick Jameson might call nostalgia films, or otherwise works that deal heavily with the past. In depictions of the past, there is a wealth of conceptions about the represented time that could be learned from, the creator's subjective memory or beliefs about life in that era. In studying these, in asking questions, an idea of nostalgia's function in art begins to form. Our relationship with nostalgia is explored. What is nostalgic and what are the signifiers? Is there anything of substance being said about the time, or is it just set dressing to bring about nostalgia? What is the goal of eliciting this feeling? What is the effect on the viewer? What are the ideas being communicated? Through experiencing works that depict a naturally biased view of the past, the common perceptions of the time may be changed, reinforced, and proliferated, intentionally or not. Another topic that this essay repeatedly returns to is something that you may have already heard of in passing: nostalgia and its connection to fascism. This is a fact that cannot be ignored, and it is my hope that through these several scholarly references used and the evidential examples discussed, that this connection is made clear, alongside other ruminations on the nature of nostalgia. Understanding nostalgia is imperative in the current moment, as its manipulation can be seen across the world for different intents. Think of recent American political rhetoric. What do you think "Make America Great Again" means? The use of the word "again" calls back to some intentionally vague moment in the past. When was this time that America was great? Never. Who was America great for? Think of all those chud Twitter accounts that worship the Roman Empire, or early 1900s America, lamenting the degenerate morals of the present. Why do they crave the past so strongly? Consider the propaganda of the United States in previous months. The US government using a screenshot of Halo 1 as a recruitment tool for ICE, fabricating a parallel between immigrants and the antagonists of the game. Or the use of Call of Duty's missile activation animation, edited together with real footage of the missile strikes that opened the 2026 Iran war. These strikes resulting in an Iranian school, Minab, being hit, killing 156 people, most of which were children. They are shitposts that downplay the atrocities being committed and appeal only to the most thoughtless idiots possible, but they also use famous cultural works that harken back to the past. Halo from 2001, and while it was the 2023 Modern Warfare 3 used in that clip, that game itself is rooted in the late 2000s, when the original Modern Warfare and its sequel became cultural touchstones. Little side note, these posts seem to have been scrubbed from the internet, besides news sites that reported on them initially. That's fucking weird. Hell, they even used a meme from an old episode of SpongeBob. It is appealing to the childhood of people who grew up with these works, used as propaganda for those who are now of age to be employed to commit cruelty in the name of the state. Your nostalgia is being manipulated in the current moment.
You are not your childhood. Memory is the grotesque narcissism of individuality and reason. Nostalgia. Nostalgia is the testament that will strengthen the flock.
Fascism is fed with fear. Fear of the other. Fear of the future. Fear of the world at large. Even those innermost fears, the things you would not be caught dead saying you are afraid of, are stoked and preyed upon. Fears use the power an authoritarian machine that is nothing without the control of the hearts and minds of the populace. Fear is how they control. Those deep-seated fears have been seen recently in America with the obvious sexual anxieties of reactionary men. The fear of their masculine status being wounded pushes them to act out camp versions of what they believe to be masculine acts. A pitiful hunger for power, dressing up in tack gear, playing with their guns and enacting violence. This posturing brought on by fear has classically been instrumentalized to use scared men for violent, often fascist causes, from Mussolini's black shirts to the Nazis, and now in America with the growing members of ICE. Fears are one of the easiest avenues for manipulation. That's why it is repeatedly used tactic in the fascist playbook. But when we say we aren't scared, when we stand up to the fear-mongering, the whole manipulation falls apart. In the series of adaptations of Stephen King's It that started in 2017, fear is used by the creature It to control the citizens of Derry to many ends. First and foremost, it feeds on fear, its source of sustenance. It also uses fear to manufacture the proper conditions for feeding ground. Citizens of Derry ready to be exploited or eaten because of the perpetual anxiety they carry every day. Of course, the most pertinent way that it uses fear is towards children. Kids are easily scared, and very easily manipulated through their fear, making them a favorable target for the creature who is nothing without those fears to feed on. Even in It Chapter 2, we see that the now adult members of the Losers Club are still haunted by the things that scared them in childhood. This anxiety planted in them early still plaguing them decades in the future. Even though all but one of them had tried to leave Derry behind, they are right back where they were when they were children after hearing that It is feeding again. It seeds fear into the people of Derry and waits for the right moment to reap the sustenance from those people. The citizens of Derry are stuck in the cycle of being It's feeding ground. Everyone is scared of some current threat to their way of life, and nearly everyone seems to be happy to be part of this cycle. Except the losers. Out of everyone in the whole town, only this group stands up to try and stop It. Why? Because they are the outgroup. Literally called the Losers Club, the members of the club are all brought together by the ostracization they experienced from their community. They exist outside the norm of Derry, seen as too weak, too fat, promiscuous, non-Christian, nerdy, or just a racial minority in an extremely white town. Welcome to Derry also brings us a cast of kids rejected by their peers. A girl that is made out to be mentally unstable, an Italian-American boy, 2 African-American kids, and a disabled girl. Fascist politics are centered around this in-group versus out-group dynamic, used to unify a group under fascist rule, and to demonize people that are opposed to that rule or the core tenets of fascism. The out-group is never just one thing, as the definition is made to be nebulous so that a fascist state can attack whoever they assign to be part of that out-group. In Nazi Germany, it was primarily the Jews, but also the mentally ill, disabled, foreigners or immigrants, queers, the non-Aryan. The list goes on. In America, the list is similar, but now starting with people who have brown skin and transgender people. Be sure, the people part of the outgroup will grow, as it always does. The people targeted by fascism and put in an outgroup can easily see the mechanics of fascism, and are therefore in a position to whistleblow on the formations of fascist thought and to begin a fight against it. At least that's pretty easy in fiction. In It, where a group of children can take on this terrible creature of great power directly. Not that the characters don't face persecution from the fascists of Derry. The kids are bullied, bad, like getting carved up with a knife, bad. And in a key point of the history of Derry, It uses fears of white citizens, part of that in-group, to form a racist hate mob to burn down the African-American hangout, the Black Spot, killing several black citizens of Derry and creating more fear to sate the fascistic It. It's the demonization of the outgroup that also sustains fascism, the scapegoating of everything wrong being the fault of the outgroup. Fear of the outgroup, and fear of anything outside of the decided, manufactured norm. Derry, and many real small towns that I have been to in real life, have this eerie feeling of being stuck in time. Like the development of the town was just paused at a certain point. The people, the buildings, the infrastructure, the ideals, they stand out of step with chronology than more densely populated places. A time capsule of the good old days. In Derry, history is clean, and so is the present. In the novel of It, in the interludes of the book that take place over a few months right before the Losers Club reunite as adults, Mike, the lighthouse keeper of Derry, discovers the buried history of Derry through old records and interviews with locals who tell them the stories that aren't to be spoken of. He learns about the darkness of the town, the murders, disappearances, the killings at the Black Spot, which have all been erased from Derry's history, sanitized. A picturesque vision of Derry was constructed and sustained by the people of Derry, and no doubt it, erasing the past and establishing a common understanding of the town's history. A beautiful, safe town that never changes, is always in its ideal vision of white suburban America circa 1950. But we see through the experiences of the various characters that is not the case. It's not but a construction. Just like that accent, taught to wealthy white boys who went to private schools that had them speak that way, created for the purpose of sounding moneyed, sounding upper class. The book How Fascism Works by Jason Stanley holds in it several keys to understanding the current political moment as well as the ideal construction of Derry's history. In the first chapter, Stanley describes a common fascist tactic present through history: the mythical past, a false image of the past that fascist politicians can point to as an aspirational goal, a complete fabrication that cannot be revived because it never existed in the first place. Quoting the book's introduction, fascist politicians justify their ideas by breaking down a common sense of history and creating a mythic past to support their vision for the present. This fracturing of a common understanding is central here because it involves sanitizing history, removing the uncomfortable parts and the things that don't align with fascist ideals, erasing the past to put forward perfection. Perfection in a past that cannot be brought back, or perfection that is believed to be sustained in small pockets of a nation, like a small town in the far-flung Maine. As Jason Stanley writes, with the creation of a mythic past, fascist politics creates a link between nostalgia and the realization of fascist ideals. Nostalgia. This tactic preys on nostalgia by manufacturing a yearning for an imagined past. A past when all was good, all was safe, when the horrors of modernity and the outside world couldn't hurt you. A time when everyone had their roles. Fathers were fathers and mothers were mothers. Women were pure and men were strong. A past that never existed. The mythic past exists in Derry in several ways, most obviously in the previously mentioned expunging of the town's true history of violence and hate, the events that sully what it wants to be a pretty picture. Mike's research into the past gives us several horror stories that have been purged from the town's collective memory. Of course, there is the racially motivated mass killing in the Black Spot, but there is also the case of familial annihilation in 1851, where a man poisoned himself and his family, a factory explosion that killed more than 100 people in 1906, and a large mob composed of Derry residents murdering the Bradley gang, who were laying low in the town after a robbery. These incidents aren't to be remembered. The incredibly high rates of missing children are swept under the rug when Mike questions Derry police. There cannot be a sense that anything is wrong in this picturesque Derry. In regards to mythologizing and glorifying the far past of Derry, the great victories and conquests of the town's past are reflected in the Paul Bunyan statue in the town square, a fictitious character that represents the triumphs of North American loggers over inclement conditions and nature. This connects to what Jason Stanley says about the distant mythic past, constructed to be a time of glory of the nation, with wars of conquest led by patriotic generals, its armies filled with its countrymen, able-bodied, loyal warriors whose wives were at home raising the next generation. While lumberjacks may not be soldiers, the conquest is still similar, a domination over environment carried out by strong men in a time far from current memory. The subjugation of nature to build the future. But in Derry, it is again a half memory. Derry's image of a logger should be tied to an event in 1905, where a mass murder took place at the Sleepy Silver Dollar bar. Thinking that a group of fellow lumberjacks had killed his group of friends, Claude Huervo starts hacking this group of 5 into pieces with his axe, the other patrons of the bar not paying any mind to what is happening, as if in a trance. When the killing was done, the police quietly took Claude, who was just sitting at the bar, into custody, though not long after the town mobbed together to drag Claude out of his cell to be hanged. Again, this violent event has been erased from Derry's history. The image of a lumberjack has been rewritten to be the ideal fictional folk hero Paul Bunyan, a point of excessive pride for Derry, covering the real, in the context of the novel's world, killings that took place in the town. In the present, these myths become the basis of the nation's identity under fascist politics. Jason Stanley continues from the previous quote. One of the many malignant growths of fascist thought in America in recent years is seen across the internet with the popularization of trad wife aesthetics, 1950s American interior design, clothing, and, in the worst cases, gender roles. The woman as the housemaker, cooking, cleaning, and child-rearing while the man of the house brings in money to support the family. The literal advertised idealization of a domestic woman's lifestyle as seen in the media of the time. Betty Friedan's The Feminine Mystique lays out the realities of the 50s housewife in the first chapter, how the prevailing thought of the time was that women could desire no greater destiny than to glory their own femininity, devoting their lives to finding a husband and bearing children, resulting in the baby boom, the US overtaking the birth rate of India, and mothers being advised to follow through with the birth of their third or fourth child, even if it was known to be a stillbirth. Women ate a chalk called Metrical to stay skinny for their husbands or to attract one. Married women's lives took place in their kitchen, only leaving their house to shop or to accompany their husband and or child. Despite the selling point of not having to work, to focus on one's family, Frieden continues, in the late 50s, a third of women worked in their older age to support their husbands or to get money for their child's tuition, not pursuing careers. It is a very conservative, traditionalist, and definitely fascist idea that women's roles are to be limited to mother or wife. This is the same thing that women were told to be in Nazi Germany and Mussolini's Italy. Yet we see a yearning for it today. A return to a nostalgic, idealized unreality extrapolated from media and advertisements of the time, which is an untrue vision of history. People who try to emulate this style are, in at least a small way, promoting this mythical past and fascist politics. While there might be something to say about separating the aesthetics from the politics, and that's a whole other thing I can't get into right now, in my opinion, that is still some shaky fucking ground. You cannot remove politics, as it is entrenched in every aspect of our subjective realities. That doesn't stop you from looking the other way. There can be a reclamation and change of meaning, but that's not what I'm seeing. What I am seeing is the conjuring of misremembered gender roles serving fascistic ideals, roles that trap us all. Considering the use of gender roles to political ends, Episode 6 of Welcome to Derry features one of the most clear pieces of evidence for the fascistic characteristics of the creature It. Ingrid Kirsch, daughter of Pennywise, the dancing clown who was taken by It decades ago, hears from a patient in the asylum she worked in that a clown by the same name was telling her to meet him in the basement. Ingrid, having missed her father dearly after he disappeared when she was a child, decides to bring the child down to meet him. Of course, It is not her father, but damn does It giggle in joy when it realizes that Ingrid's desire to see, be loved by, and make her father proud could be oh so easily manipulated. It tears into the child in front of Ingrid, literally ripping her out of Ingrid's grasp. Terrified, she shrinks to the floor, crying, until It speaks to her again. Not as Pennywise, but her father outside of makeup. He consoles her, tells her everything she has ever wanted to hear from her dad. How much he missed her, calling her a pet name, telling her everything is going to be alright.
Just open the door and let me in.
Stepping into the child's pooled blood for the sake of her papa, Ingrid opens the door and believes It to be her real father. A foundational mechanism of fascism is hierarchy. That aforementioned in-group is higher than the out-group, but be assured there is still a massive gap between that in-group and the ruling class. The fascist figurehead is there to lead the disorganized, confused masses towards a brighter future for the nation. The leader is to be looked up to with incredible respect, seen as a role model, and given complete trust, much like a father. This is where cultural gender roles, common throughout most of the world, come into and bolster the idea of fascism. Nearly everyone has had a father or a father figure who fits somewhat into the classic patriarchal role of breadwinner, protector, rule maker for a family. Now what if that patriarchal figure was widened from simply the ruler of a household to a ruler of a nation? The relationship between fascist leader and subject is supposed to be programmed into the public early through the patriarchal mechanisms of the idealized family. Fascism is an ideology that is built on the presumption that there is someone who knows what's best for you and your country, someone who is inherently better than you in some way, and is to be the sole decision maker. The common gender roles assigned to a father are very similar, especially in the image of the nuclear family. To a child, the father knows best, gets the last say, and is older and therefore wiser than you. It's not hard to project and transform that patriarchal image into a governmental leader when the population is already programmed to respect their fathers in this unquestioning way because of cultural norms. Am I saying that fascists are a bunch of losers with daddy issues? Yes, but that's a bit beside the point. It is a designed manipulation. Life is a lot easier if you can just trust your father figure to do the right thing, even if they are killing and eating a child in front of you. The sudden acceptance of the horrors wrought by it, a patriarchal figure in the eyes of Ingrid, is clearly depicted in the scene of Ingrid bringing it a meal, as is the making of a fascist. He must have good reason. I must help him because he's my papa and everything he does must be for the greater good, part of a plan. No wonder she's always putting on clown makeup. Nostalgia is a key part of its story. The construction and the sustained image of a sanitized past invading every part of life in Derry, the gender roles that are tied to what is expected of the town, and the hatred towards the people who do not fit into what is believed to be the historical norm. Even the mechanic of the story where the kids forget about the realities of Derry once they leave it, remembering only a normal childhood and repressing or internalizing the horrors they lived through, support this, thinking, oh, my childhood wasn't so bad, when in actuality it was very, very bad. That's the main function of nostalgia on a subjective level. While the protagonists don't think of their childhoods fondly, more an indifference going by the movies, the town is clouded by nostalgia. One last quote from Jason Stanley wraps together a lot of what I've been talking about. That past societies were rarely as patriarchal, or indeed as glorious, as fascist ideology represents them as being, is beside the point. This imagined history provides proof to support the imposition of hierarchy in the present, and it dictates how contemporary society should look and behave. How Derry should look and behave is mandated by this nostalgic dream created by it, as is the hierarchy created in service to it. Small-town America play acting as what it is told it should be in service to fascist politics. Importantly, a small town. Because these largely unknown areas are looked at with many presumptions by outsiders, and across the world are used to, truthfully or not, present the long-lived past ideals, culture, and lifestyle of a nation untarnished by outside influence. Hotbeds for projection. The fictional mountain village of Hanyuda in the game Forbidden Siren is much like Derry, isolated from larger communities, not very developed, and holding a dark history. It is a vision of the Japanese countryside, an image that serves the binary delineation between the cities where everybody lives and everybody moves to, and these low population areas that many people come from, were raised in, destined to leave and only returning to for family visits. There is no work in Hanyuda, no places of industry besides the wealth of rice paddy fields and a long-abandoned factory. Nothing to generate an economy in the village to further develop it, and nothing connected to the village to make it keep up with the times. It is stuck. A dingy old soba restaurant sits on the laughably small main street of the town, made of old rotting wood and serving a local spin on the dish. Decades-old posters are on a bulletin board, advertisements for the 70s or earlier on walls, dirt roads made mud with the rain, old infrastructure and architecture. Nothing to reflect that this game takes place in 2003. Haneda is stuck in time both figuratively and literally. It is a village of rituals. Looking around Haneda, in the archives, you will find symbols, items, and writings that relate to the mana religion that is neither Shinto, Buddhist, or Christian, though it shares commonalities between all of them. Every couple of decades, there is a ritual to be performed for their deity, a god named Datatsushi, a sacrifice to be made to resurrect their dead god. And in 2003, the ritual came to pass. The characters of the game are displaced into an other version of Haneda, a version that connects the village to different time periods of itself when the ritual was attempted before, most importantly to the time the ritual failed in 1976. The village is temporally collapsing on itself, the past literally crashing into the present. Haneda is cursed to relive its past. Literally cursed, but if you want to know more about that, check out my last video or play the game yourself. Writing basic recaps is like pulling teeth for me. Entire areas of the town were brought into the other world permanently to add to the collected wreckage of the town's history, manifesting in the destruction of the area in the real world, like a landslide in 1976 bringing in several parts of the village. The other world seems to be kind of timey-wimey, like how the flow of time is convoluted in Dark Souls. And yes, my god, I could talk about the Dark Souls universe in this essay, but there would be so much to talk about, and it's already going to be so long as it is. The areas of the game seem to shift in space, and other periods of time are visible from one another, as exampled by the massacre ending. The village of Haneda was already stagnant, physically stuck in the past in the real world, but in this other world, we see the actual manifestation of that, and it's not just limited to the locations of the village, but people as well. The villagers of Haneda, upon being brought into the other world, are largely transformed into creatures known as Shibito, a loose translation of that being dead person, despite them being granted eternal life through their transformations. This transformation is begun by taking in the blood of Datatsushi into your body, blood that runs down the Mana River and, in the other world, is an ocean around the mountain village. In their immortality, in this town frozen in time, the Shibito repeat their routines, their way of life, as if nothing has changed. Again and again, they go about their days working, farming, eating, cops shooting children, and worshipping their god. Their ideal life stretched into infinity. The only thing that stops them from repeating their routines is when they encounter someone that isn't one of them. The Shibito see their transformation as a blessing, hard to refute when they seem to be experiencing ecstasy in every moment, constantly laughing and smiling, all the while crying blood. From their view, it is a gift that must be given to the people who aren't Shibito, a gift that begins with the recipient's killing. They push onto others this way of life, a worldview based in nostalgia, in the repetition of the past living inside the ruins of the past. The Shibito are no longer human. They want no change except for the everlasting continuation of the moment in which they live, a moment that is defined by the past, leaving zero avenues for the new. A particular level stands out. Sitting together as a family is 3 Shibito in a living room, laughing and seemingly enjoying each other's company. A mother, a father, and a daughter. Splitting up to go through their respective routines, the father, dressed in a classic white button-up, hinting to a white-collar job, just wanders around the house, going into a room to try and smoke with a broken lighter and scratching his head in the bathroom as if he's not sure what he's supposed to be doing at home. The mother, dressed in an almost cliché dress, goes between the kitchen, where she hacks at a cutting board with nothing on it, and in front of the TV, alone, laughing at TV static. The daughter goes around the house drawing on the floors and writing nonsense in her journal. If you inspect where she was sitting with her family, you can see that she wrote on the table, "Together forever," in the Shibito language. Each Shibito is fulfilling their familial roles in some incomplete way. Their actions are not in service to anything. The mother isn't cutting anything. The daughter writes nonsense. It is all just a performance, a monstrous pantomime of the family doing what they think they should be doing in this house. The Shibito are all in service to the deific figure Datatsushi and the creation of a paradise promised by doing as it wills. They throw away their humanity to experience this bliss and to welcome their god. Late in the game, the creation of the Shibito is realized, a housing for Datatsushi, who burns in daylight. The Shibito Nest, a maze-like structure presumably made up of wood torn from buildings around Haneda. Still nothing truly new, built on top of and integrating with the buildings already present in Haneda. As the game goes on, the Shibito are seen to be transforming, their physical form changing to better welcome the coming of their god and to be cleansed of sin. The Shibito are compelled to complete the ritual of Umi-Okuri and Umi-Gairi, ascending to the Red Sea to be purified in Datatsushi's blood, and then to return from the ocean of blood, clean and closer to God. They grow wings, antennae, and appendages that resemble sea life, much like Datatsushi itself, who shares characteristics of a seahorse. They are being made in Datatsushi's image. They are the chosen ones. But not all Shibito complete the Umi-Okuri and Umi-Gairi. Failed Shibito are infected villagers who were found to be not good enough for transformation, whether that be because of a lack of faith, a conscious resistance to joining Datatsushi's thrall, or some other deficiency is unclear. Still, they have the immortality received by the infection, cursed to eternally wander the sea of blood as they fall apart. They must deteriorate over time. The failed Shibito seen in the game are decrepit figures with any identifying features of who they were worn away, leaving only this dull flesh clinging to their bodies. They cannot die, and they are not welcome to the paradise of Datatsushi. An existence of infinite pain and wandering is what they experience. A cult of personality is often used as a defining characteristic of fascism. A strong central figure, a promise about what the world is to be made into. Haneda's mana religion is literally a cult, and Datatsushi presents itself as a god or a savior. Ardent followers work to increase its power, its reach over all in the village. If someone is not like them, their first instinct is to kill them with the goal of making them into another Shibito. The absorption of the individual into a decided norm, the blood curse. If not, they are just another failed Shibito. Even this in-group of individuals chosen by God still has subdivisions, failures, outcasts that are to suffer for eternity. The hierarchy in Haneda is clear, and it is centered around Datatsushi and the monstrous vision it has for the world. Subservience to a perceived greater power. The Shibito are not just another race, but a whole other species better than human, which still has deviants among them that are spurned. The nostalgia present throughout the village is harnessed by Datatsushi towards fascistic ends with the promise of eternal life. A scene near the end of the game shows a character nearly swayed by this promise of the past returning. Tamon Takeuchi is a university professor that grew up in Haneda and returned to his hometown with one of his students to investigate the newest attempt at the ritual that failed when he was just a kid. Him and his student, Yoriko Anno, are pulled into the other world with everybody else, forced to survive Shibito while they try to dig towards the truth of what is happening in the village. What happened when Tamon was a child. One of the last levels of the game has you playing as Tamon, walking through the vast Shibito nest after he hears two familiar voices calling his name. Tamon. Through the twisting corridors of wood and sheet metal that make up the nest, Tamon eventually comes to a path that looks to jut into the nest unnaturally, a footpath up to his childhood home. The home that was wiped away in a landslide in 1976 with his parents still inside. 27 years later, and he is back home. Through all the fear, the danger, the loneliness, Tamon is back at his family home and the entryway light is on for him, waiting for him. Inside, he finds his mother and father waiting for him. Instantly, Tamon seems to almost regress into childhood, into the child that was left alone when his parents were taken from him, dropping to his knees, crying, arms out like a toddler. All the strength and leadership seen from him throughout the game melts away in this moment. Hours later, we see the reality of what Tamon was seeing thanks to Yoriko. He is still on his knees, holding his parents in a dark, dilapidated room, completely unlike the bright, pristine room shown in the previous scene. Embracing Tamon is his mother and father, both failed Shibito, withered to the bone. Skin, muscles, and faces worn away like a stone against the sea, holding their son close as he slowly becomes one of them. That is until Yoriko kicks down the door and beats his parents off of him, asking if he's done saying his farewells to his family, pulling him out of the house and breaking him out of the delusion he was in. With Tamon's story, we see how fascism can prey on past trauma and use nostalgia to exploit you. With the promise of eternal life in paradise, Tamon would be able to return to the childhood he lost, go back to before his parents died, and be with them forever. Everything being good, just like the past was, forever. Nostalgia for a past that cannot be returned to. A surrender to fascism equated to coming home and drowning in the past. Siren is a game about reliving the past endlessly. If you've seen my previous video where I talk about Siren, you'll know that it is even ingrained into the gameplay. Repetition of levels over and over again, time looping back to the beginning or the ending, having you complete the same tasks you already have done in search for something new. Haneda is a countryside village like many in real-life Japan, dying, with the wreckage of the past sitting there to rot. The other world is a nostalgic paradise where the people who still lived in these ghost towns no longer have to worry about the future. Just their ideal past, or even a nostalgic delusion where the town would never die, would never change, just like the Shibito. Siren presents this tension with the past and puts the player through some grueling gameplay to get to a point, to make the player become bored, apathetic with the repetition of culture and the fight against fascism, all the while living inside the long death of the past. Nostalgia is cultivated, preserved, and weaponized in Haneda to, again, make the ideal subject of fascism. The game ends with only one of the many characters surviving, a kid, Harumi, who escaped from the other world. This time, all of Haneda was caught in a landslide, pulled into the other world. Her town wiped from the earth, and with no ties to the past, Harumi has no choice but to move on into the future. Apathetic with the repetition of culture and living inside the long death of the past. Speaking of which, let's talk about Stranger Things! One has to ask, why the 80s? Muschietti's It movies were dragged into the 80s when the source material takes place in the 50s. Sure, Stranger Things has plot elements that lend itself to an 80s setting, well, one that I can think of, and it is the conflict with Russia. The US military creating a weapon that can be used in the Cold War. 11 is what put the whole story into motion. And the 80s is a very sensible setting for a story on the Cold War. But is there any other integral part of the plot that necessitates an 80s setting? Does the series even say anything interesting about the Cold War? Stranger Things and It 2017, for almost no reason besides aesthetics, at the whims of the creators who have a very specific memory or image of the time, surely influenced heavily by nostalgia, have created a mythological past with the creation of their idealized youth. Stranger Things presents symbols and objects of the 80s without context for the express goal of conveying a vibe of the 80s. The Duffer Brothers have said in old interviews around Season 1's release that the show was based on the media that they had been brought up on, E.T., Stand By Me, the hits of the 80s. Talking about the origins of Stranger Things, Ross Duffer said, "It was just us talking about, if we could see any show in the world, what would it be? And we wanted something in the vein of the classic films we loved growing up. Obviously the influences are all over the show, whether it's Spielberg stuff or John Carpenter or the novels of Stephen King. The Duffers wanted to imitate the films of the 80s because, yeah, there is a kind of magic to those movies. Stranger Things Season 1 was very much like that, but as the series went on, it ran out of originality, leaning further on its inspirations, further into nonsensical symbols of the evil Russians and contextless cultural objects they pay homage to. It is vibe without substance. Just like Stranger Things, It 2017 uses the visuals of kids on bikes, having an adventure during summer break, exploring their town, a symbol of youthful freedom, sunshine, laughter, and friendship. Nostalgia. But is it our childhoods, or is it just the fucking Goonies? As far as I can tell, the one use of It's 80s setting is to evoke similar feelings to those of the Goonies. Where Stranger Things gets masturbatory about artifacts and products of the time, it really could have been in any time period. There is no plot point that requires the 80s setting, no commentary on the decade. Just music snippets, clothing, pop culture, and vibes. Fucking vibes. Meaningless aesthetics only existing to capitalize on nostalgia. Stranger Things is guilty of this too. Aside from the aforementioned relevance to the 80s that the plot has, the show is obsessed with bringing up the culture of the time, not just as homage, but almost as advertisement for the music, movies, technology, and toys of the decade. With the hollow vision of the 80s in It, and the biased representation of the time given in Stranger Things, we encounter a problem. Through countless works created in the 80s and or set in the 80s that have become so core to American culture, the error of these works being used as a true picture of the 80s is possible if not promoted. This type of thin and meaningless nostalgia seen in It and Stranger Things leaves the door open for this image of the past to be misinterpreted, misremembered, and mythologized. As spoken about in earlier sections, this creation of false pasts is dangerous, ready to be used for ill purpose. With so many works created as nostalgia bait in recent years, it is hard to ignore how these time periods are being presented to us, and how these images are being understood in the current day. In Frederick Jameson's essay, Postmodernism, or The Cultural Logic of Late Capitalism, he writes about a specific type of cultural product he calls the nostalgia film. Films that depict a familiar past through the use of style, attempting to appropriate a missing past. These simulacra of a bygone era open a path from the past into the present for aesthetic colonization, by way of reproduction of fashion, social dynamics, and symbols. Jameson identifies that these productions are incompatible with a real, true historical account of the past, writing, "What is more interesting and more problematical are the ultimate attempts, through this new discourse, to lay siege either to our own present and immediate past, or to a more distant history that escapes individual existential memory." Jameson's essay was written in 1984, and when he was referring to nostalgia films, he made his points in reference to movies like American Graffiti and Chinatown, which portrayed the 1950s and 1930s respectively. This problem of making an image of the past is not new, and I imagine that I will eventually see the times that I have lived through being embellished. But the nostalgia works depicting the 80s seem particularly long in the tooth, and it's not hard to imagine why. The 80s never ended. It is 2026 and there are still new Star Wars movies and series coming out, a Mario film adaptation, and the third movie in a series of remakes of Evil Dead. And that's just this year. Successful IP from the 80s isn't allowed to die. Cultural products remain, and the people who cling to them oh so dearly, the losers that throw a tantrum when a person of color plays a role in the franchise that they tie their identity to, are attached to the idea of the 80s as a perfect time in history. A simpler time, as it was presented in their favorite movie or as assumed by the production of their obsession, when in reality, they either misremember or didn't even experience what they are nostalgic about. The movies of the 80s and the replications we see now are creating an image of the 80s as an incredible time, a better time for some. In the 2010s, there was an undeniable surge in the amount of 80s-themed media. Of course, the biggest of these was Stranger Things, bringing the 80s nostalgia into the mainstream. But there was also It, and several other 80s remakes and sequels, like The Thing 2011, Ghostbusters 2016, and RoboCop 2014. These movies either continue a canon of an image of the 80s cultural artifact, or have contributed to a mythic past like the movie Turbo Kid or Terrifier, two egregious examples of aesthetic reproduction completely detached from reality or inspiration. Ready Player One was a climax of this cultural moment, every possible IP and reference from the 80s smashed together to create a fanboy's wet dream. The actual story of the work being nothing more than pastiche at best, and actively coddling the toxic, geeky male ego at worst. When you get there, you will already be there. Stranger Things, Twin Peaks, and the nostalgia industry is an essay written by Dan Hassler Forrest about the nostalgia industry and the ways in which nostalgia is used in the works he analyzes. It's a good essay, you should check it out. In reference to the way Stranger Things uses nostalgia to promote the 80s, he writes, "In short, while Stranger Things relates back to contemporary subcultures of toxic masculinity, gamer culture, men's right activists groups, and other far-right discourses to a lesser extent than the more obviously toxic nostalgia fest Ready Player One, it nevertheless feeds and sustains a deeply conservative cultural, social, and political sensibility, in which the attractions of this earlier era are exaggerated and made more spectacular, while its problems are casually papered over. Sure, Stranger Things does show some of the problems of the time, with queer characters that are largely stuck in the closet, the rampant bullying of those seen as other, the satanic panic brought on by the country's newly revitalized pearl clutching, and mob mentality. But my God, does it not want to get political to actually explain these things that are results of the historical moment. These issues are not really thought through and explained in a historical context. Instead, they are just used as plot devices, 80s reference, or the Twinkie equivalent of queer representation. Unnourishing. Instead, Stranger Things revels in Dungeons and Dragons, Coca-Cola, and trite tropes. The mythical past being used to empower the most marginalized demographic in the world. White male gamers. But being serious, this is a form of the constructed past being used, rallied around. Even though I'm sure that this was never the intention of the Duffer Brothers or other creators of the 80s simulacra. Yet, it is a logical outcome of portraying the past as better or more suitable for a certain group than the present. The works I'm focusing on in this section may not be intentionally weaponizing nostalgia, but through pandering to certain sensibilities, these works are still fascist instruments. Many of these nostalgia works present a rose-tinted view of the past that ignores the horrors of the time. Stranger Things ignoring key aspects of the decade, which is a cause for several conflicts in the plot because the show is terrified of getting political. Let's talk about Ronald Reagan. The President of the United States in 1981 to 89, the foul mark on this country that Reagan left cannot be understated. This isn't a history lesson. Look up the war on drugs, the AIDS crisis, his foreign policy, the Iran-Contra affair, deregulation, his anti-communist sentiments, his Christian family values, the conservative movement of the 80s. The list goes on and on and on. But the key to this section is Reaganomics. If you've heard of the term trickle-down economics, you have a pretty good idea of the economic policies Reagan put in place. Tax cuts for the rich, with the idea that the wealth accumulated at the top would eventually make its way down to the less wealthy. But as we hopefully all know now, the ultra-rich do not spend their money. It only accumulates at the top, crushing us all. The rich get richer, and the lower and middle classes get nothing. Both it and Stranger Things have characters from poor backgrounds as part of the main cast, and their socioeconomic circumstances inform events that happen in these stories. Will Byers from Stranger Things lives with his single mother and his older brother. By today's standards, they live pretty well, able to afford a modest, isolated house. But the show makes the point that they are not very well off. Will's mother, Joyce, is constantly working, necessitating the older brother, Jonathan, to step up and do some caretaking and money-making. Will is said to be bullied because of his clothes, presumably because they look old or cheap, although it looks like the same as all the other fashion to me. The night that Will is taken, Joyce is working as she always is, and Jonathan takes on one of his friend's shifts to help bring in some money for his family. They didn't realize he was gone until the morning of the next day, when he wasn't getting ready for school. Throughout the season, they both lambast themselves for not being there for Will, when the real problem is that they were both forced to be elsewhere, earning a wage to support their struggling family. Now, I'm not saying there is a clear line between Reaganomics and the poverty of the Byers family, but it does reflect the times in which the show takes place, a family with one source of income struggling, while Mike's family opposite thrives with even more mouths to feed. The picturesque, white, conservative, suburban family from Reagan's wet dreams endowed with a massive house in a good neighborhood, and the single mother struggling to support her two sons. Illustrative of class borders, lack of mobility between them, and absent support for those struggling. Now, this point seems to refute my previous accusations of how Stranger Things refuses to get political. But the thing is that the show does not make this choice consciously. It is just my reading of it. I highly doubt the Duffer Brothers were thinking of the economics of the 80s when they wanted to write a poor family to be sympathetic for. There was a level of irresponsible unawareness to politics in Stranger Things, like the scapegoating of Russians as so extremely evil in a show which started in 2016. Obviously, Russia sucks, but it is this unhuman, evil Russian robot portrayal that is ridiculous. The use of the satanic panic only as a plot device without saying a single thing of substance about it. No mention of the conservative Christian ideals that surged thanks to the Reagan family, or the associated gender roles being re-entrenched in American society. Even the character of Nancy Wheeler, a character that had actual complexity to her deep fear of becoming like her parents, eventually became a gun-toting, badass Barbie who only cared about her family and herself when it is in relation to a man. Nancy's less Sigourney Weaver's Ripley, and is more a character from Red Dawn who only exists to satisfy conservative anxieties and fantasies. Oh! Stranger Things not only misrepresents the past, but also seems to put blinders over its eyes when it skirts a topic that could have any actual substance in its relation to history. It, 2017, similarly ignores or fails to make use of the 1980s setting. Again, if we want to connect the effects of Reagan to the setting, we could talk about Beverly and Mike, the two characters that have rough home lives. Mike lost his parents when he was a child, so he has to work on his uncle's farm to earn his keep at a young age. Beverly, in the movies, lives alone with her abusive and creepy father, who is the sole income for the household. A big part of the Reagan administration was the purveyance of Christian ideals and the longevity of the nuclear family in America. In 1986, just days before Christmas, Reagan put out an address to the nation about the importance of family and how the unit of the family was weakening in recent years. He spoke.
Will and Ariel Durant called the family the nucleus of civilization. They understood that all those aspects of civilized life that we most deeply cherish, freedom, the rule of law, economic prosperity, and opportunity, that all these depend upon the strength and integrity of the family.
As bullshit as that claim is, I'm sure the rhetoric about family had an impact on how people that didn't fit into the image of the nuclear family were considered. Shun the other. While not explicit, the argument could be made that the ostracization of Mike and Bev was in part due to them not being part of a traditional family unit. The family values of Reagan and how it is incompatible with Mike and Bev. Of course, the movie didn't do anything with a reading like this. It, 2017, might not have been able to from the outset because, again, the novel was set in the 50s, which did have its own problems with the idealization of the nuclear family. There are so many avenues that could have been taken to make use of the 80s setting and say something of substance, but it just refuses to. Appropriate the aesthetics and drape it over a story that did originally make use of its temporal setting. At the end of the novel, Derry is flooded, washed away in a flood, destroying the seedbed of fascism. But in the movie, Chapter 2 ends with the main cast of characters literally reflecting on themselves in a shop window, looking at their past selves in this hollow way that really only serves as a scene transition, bright coloring emulating the sunshine of a summer that will never end. Derry is calling you is written in that window. A different name for the mythic past that Jason Stanley wrote about, a term that might be more widely used, is ultranationalist palingenesis. Originating from the professor and political theory writer Roger Griffin in his 1991 book, The Nature of Fascism, which may be the first work to point towards a fascist nostalgic connection. Ultranationalist palingenesis, or palingenetic ultranationalism, is a component of fascism that drives a rebirth of a nation in the image of its past incarnation. The phenomenal podcast Bloodwork, hosted by Greg Foley, spoke about this topic in an episode about fascist principles, episode 11. Listen to Bloodwork. Giving an idea of what exactly ultranationalist palingenesis is, Greg explains,
Palingenesis is about more than rebirth, because fascism promises a restoration of the nation through a return to the glory of a bygone era. Because on the one hand, the myth is traditionalist. It gazes backwards through time to the nation's historic lifeways, practices, social arrangements, great epochs, folklores and so on as idealized reference points for its project.
On the other hand, the palingenetic myth is always positioning that return as some point in the future. It is looking to the past and the future at the same damn time. This was seen in Hitler's Germany, not quite looking back to, more creating the canon of, Germany's Reichs. Of course, it is known that Nazi Germany was to be the Third Reich. But what about the first and the second? The Second Reich began after the unification of Germany in 1871, until the establishment of the Weimar Republic after the German Revolution in 1981. Now, the First Reich is quite special because, surprise, it's the Holy Roman Empire. You know, that empire that lasted 1,000 years and spread throughout Europe, which also has Roman as part of its title. Yeah, that was actually Germany, or so Hitler would like you to believe. It is important to note that, in reality, it is common sense that this was just nonsensical historical reframing done by the Nazis. It was solely a political project, and not to be mistaken for real history. But this is the past they were glorifying, a clear fabrication.
It was this glorious 1,000-year Reich that Hitler sought to redeem from history and drive forth into the future. And so the Nazi historical project was essentially one of turning history on its head by reframing the founder of the Holy Roman Empire as some kind of revered precursor to Hitler.
That is the past that was looked back towards, and the focus on the future was seen in the massive push forward modeled by the Italians,
which the Italian fascists embodied through a valorization of industry, technology, speed, action, violence, and its highest expression, war. War being the phenomenon which would both draw from and then accelerate the development of the others in a boundless process of evolution toward domination.
And the ever-presence of Hitler in the nation working to convince people that he is the leader that will give them another 1,000-year Reich. It is a constant state of becoming that will never be, as the conditions of reality make it impossible. If ultranationalist palingenesis only looks to the past as a shaky blueprint to help recreate the future as a thing to be conquered, where does that leave the present? The past is exalted. The future is to be conquered by way of a miserable present. The present is for the groundwork to be laid, misery to be taken on the chin, worked to the bone for the vision of the future, and the inconceivable horrors to be inflicted on scapegoats. Sacrifice. The present is not the place to be, but a painful means to an end for the majority of people, some more than others. Bloodwork puts it as
an irresolvable discomfort with the here and now, a pathological aversion to dwelling in the present, perhaps even a loathing of it.
A rotten bridge from the past to the future, its malevolent shadow hanging over the current reality. Fascists in history and the current era do not just use nostalgia to manipulate with a return to the fictitious past. It is not just about manufacturing that yearning for the past, but promising a way out of the present. It is a misalignment of the comforting nature and the function of nostalgia for power. There's nothing to be done now, no improved conditions that you will see anytime soon. Just eat your share of shit and work for a better future. Above the entrances to several concentration camps throughout Nazi Germany, where forced labor was just one of many cruelties, was the phrase, Arbeit macht frei. Work sets you free. Our current moment in America is quite rough. There are plenty of real issues that anyone with 2 brain cells to rub together could tell you is bad. A pointless war, pedophiles high in power, a pathetic economy, and ever-increasing unjust state violence on both citizens and non-citizens alike. But for quite some time as well, there has been the perceived slights from reactionaries scapegoating any group that they can. The belief that immigrants are taking American jobs. They aren't. DEI initiatives marginalizing the straight white male. It's not. Transgender people posing a risk to whatever the fuck they're talking about now. They are not. Blah 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 wokeness, the list goes on. To do a little psychoanalyzing here, the reactionary mind is in a very similar place to that of the Germans during the rise of Hitler. Humiliated, dejected, and hopeless for the future, though in present America it is at least partly just in their heads. To them, there is no way to be now, no way to be tomorrow, leaving only a retreat to the past simulacra, which is molded to be enticing. The artworks of a past they believed would welcome them, comfort them, a demented form of nostalgia. The Future of Nostalgia by Svetlana Boym introduces 2 tendencies of nostalgia, restorative and reflective. Restorative nostalgia is the type of nostalgia that is similar to what I've been talking about. Boym writes that this tendency of nostalgia is embodied by the nostos of nostalgia, meaning return home in ancient Greek. Reflective nostalgia's algia, longing, completing the picture. Crucially, Boym writes in reference to restorative nostalgia. The first category of nostalgics do not think of themselves as nostalgic. they believe that their project is the truth. This type of nostalgia is destructive in its mistake between reality and construction. Because if that past home is nothing but a mirage, you cannot return to it and you cannot recreate it, no matter what you do, what you sacrifice. Whether it be the American 30s, 50s, or 80s, any return would be undead and hostile. In the attribution of one's pain to the perceived slights of the present day and longing for a time that you incorrectly believe was different, the door is left open for your feelings, your yearning for a better world, to be manipulated into hate towards the wrong people, the wrong mechanisms. Let's talk about capitalism. Isn't the product placement in Stranger Things fucking crazy? The story Trojan Horses by Jess Zimmerman, featured in both the Vice website Terraform and the physical collection Terraform, Watch Worlds Burn, exhibits a sci-fi world that I regularly find myself ruminating on. The story's in the description. It is really good, so go ahead and read it first if you like. The past is like a foreign country. They have weird McDonald's specials there, reads the opening line. The story takes place in a universe where time travel was invented and quickly used to colonize and extract resources from the entirety of Earth's past. 5th century Mongolia has the unmixpeakable meat patty. There are authentic vomitoriums you could go to as a team-building exercise with your company in ancient Rome, and a Starbucks dispensary on every corner of every block of every point in history. The main character, Liz, is tired of the overcrowding, the unclean air, and endless, inescapable commercialism that is standard in every part of time and any place she can go. She is part of a company that develops a building material called Acuspackle that is used in creating just about every structure throughout the timeline. Needing to collect samples of real Roman structures to further develop their product, Liz is sent sideways into an alternate universe where time travel was never invented to get proper samples. As in the whole of her universe's timeline, there is no untainted samples to collect. Arriving in the true past, she encounters people in a village speaking, unbeknownst to her, Pig Latin, not the actual Latin that she expected and is equally unfamiliar with. After returning to her universe, a co-worker of hers that analyzed the collected samples leaked to her the fact that it was actually Acuspackle that she had collected. The people in the true past were actually from her universe. Liz, looking for any escape from her awful universe, and now knowing it is possible, makes plans to flee back there whenever she can get the chance. The story is primarily concerned with colonialism and globalism, the thought of the people who escaped the true past bringing Liz to write, the sheer rapaciousness of colonizing an entire past and then deciding it isn't enough. The hubris of convincing yourself that another culture, another time, another reality is just the place for you to build your summer home, before she declares that she will be doing the same thing. But in the background of the story, the setting of a past colonized by time travel, and that past being ruined, there is a profound message against capitalism and neoliberalism, which is inexorably linked with the criticisms against globalism and the kind of colonialism that we see today. An entire timeline, past, present, and future, ruined by extractivism, colonialism, and the endless, insatiable growth demanded by capitalism. Endless exurbs for the massive population to live close to a city for work commutes. The flattening of culture throughout space and time thanks to globalist tendencies. And fucking McDonald's! It's almost the flip side of what I've been talking about in previous sections. Instead of the simulacrum of the past invading the present by way of nostalgia, the forces of the present invade and deface the past. Stranger Things represents the 80s as a time of unfettered consumption. Amusingly, this unintentionally reflects the neoliberal sentiments of the decade, but what I mean in the actual manifestation inside the show is the copious amounts of product placement. A massive Burger King sign in the background, KFC on the family dinner table.
I love KFC.
A center frame Coca-Cola can, and Eggo's frozen waffles on the main stage. At least until I assume Eggo stopped paying for the placements. They are advertisements that cannot be ignored with the tremendous amount of them and the spotlight focus that they are often given. There's a scene in Season 4 that looks like it could have been cut straight from a Gatorade commercial. And would you look at that, there was a collaboration between Stranger Things and Gatorade with a limited time bottle that looked like the 80s design with some upside down influence. And Burger King, and McDonald's, and KFC, and Eggo's, and Coca-Cola, and Cheetos, and basically any product you could think of. There is a lot of money that went into the product placements in each episode, and it shows. It's as if whenever a character's life isn't in immediate danger, they are constantly snacking on something, labeled towards camera. There are in-world movie references, every cliche 80s hit song you could think of, and everything existing in relation to a product, even if that product is art. This is your brain on consumerism. Product placement is about brand awareness and recognition. The goal of this form of advertising is to make you know the names and look of products to several ends. In some cases, it is when you know you want something, but there are several brands selling the same thing. And if you have heard of a brand before, you are more likely to go for that product that is familiar. It can also be for the goal of associating a positive image to a product and the company that sells it. If you see Burger King in your favorite show, your mind might associate the two things, giving you positive feelings in relation to BK. There's also what seems to be a base psychological mechanism of recognition equaling positive feelings. Basically the whole driving concept behind Ready Player One. Recognizing something makes you feel good. This is called the mere exposure effect, a well-supported theory that says people come to like something, or at least look at it more favorably, the more they are exposed to it. In a scientific article that looked specifically at the connection between product placement and the mere exposure effect, it was found based on their study that the mere placement of a brand in a film tends to generate a positive attitude in an immediate post-test designed to evaluate how well subjects like the product, regardless of whether the product is recognized or not. That is to say, seeing product placement, even on a subconscious level, resulted in positive emotions about that product. Brand recognition can also be in pursuit of complete permeation throughout our psyche. The first soda that you think of is Coca-Cola, and the image you conjure in your mind is quite detailed due to the volume of advertisements. You can see the red of the can, the sound of cracking open a bottle, and the carbonation popping in a glass, can't you? Product placements, and the product recognition in consumers that it strives for, is another notch in the belt of the psychological invasion of advertisements. I think it is common knowledge now that most advertisements play on your insecurities or anxieties. Most products are sold with an image of a beautiful model that, subconsciously, you are made to think, if I buy that shirt, makeup, watch, car, whatever, I will be able to be like the models in the ad. Happy, skinny, loved. But brand recognition is uniquely evil because of the way it wants to take up residence in our heads. It wages a war of attrition against our perception, our subjectivity, to make us believe that, yes, Coca-Cola is everywhere, and everyone drinks it. It is pollution in the mind. In combining both this siege of our psyche with the constructed past animated by nostalgia, there's a disquieting notion that our sense of nostalgia, our sense of the past, is being stained by the forces of capital. The consumerism in Stranger Things runs rampant. Movie posters plastered on every wall, characters constantly snacking on or drinking a recognizable brand, the majority of the cast being a bunch of fanboys for nerd culture icons. It creates an image of the 80s where there's nothing to do but consume. That the 80s was not a time of creative, countercultural, experimental works finding niches to thrive in, following the tradition of cultural subversion from the 60s and 70s. No, it was just what the future mainstream was to eventually become. It wasn't a time to find yourself and community within music and art outside the mainstream. It was just to like things and make those things your whole personality. It wants to convince you that the brands and IP you see were always the titans that they are today, and that your identity was to be cartoonishly tied to your favorite product, just like 11. Trojan Horses puts it as polluting the past. The symbols of capital move to define the past. Stranger Things posits the 80s to be represented by popular films, Coca-Cola, Gatorade, and Egos. A temporal invasion. The cultural memory of the past is being conquered in the name of capitalism. This manner of product placement moves beyond the inescapability of advertisements that pervade nearly every aspect of our reality, goes beyond the standard incursions into our mind, and colonizes the past. The nostalgia film, bolstered by corporate interest, is the Trojan Horse. Horror is a genre that regularly catches side-eyed glances of judgment based on the nature of it being horrific. There are gradations, the visceral gore of Hereditary compared to the excess of cruelty in Cannibal Holocaust is quite the leap, but there are some that see the two in the same light. Degenerate art, if they would even call it art. This moralism is a central element of the 2021 film Censor, set in Thatcher's Britain, focusing on the controversial video nasties that emerged in the 80s. The film follows a, you guessed it, film censor that rates, cuts, or rejects films based on the content they have. Enid sees her work as vital to the good of the world, saying,
"It's not entertainment, Mum. I do it to protect people."
This film is, in some ways, a ghost story. in the Gothic sense of the horrors of the past lingering, haunting the present. Enid is haunted by her little sister, Nina, who disappeared when they were children, constantly looking for her in strangers on the street. It stands to reason that her drive to protect people stems from this loss. The plot of the film picks up when, in one of her film reviews, she sees an actress that looks just like her sister grown up, in a scene that is almost the exact scenario of what she remembers of the day her sister went missing. This launches her paranoid investigation into the actress and the film she stars in. Not all people exist in the same now. They do so only externally, by virtue of the fact that they may all be seen today. But that does not mean that they are living at the same time with others. Opens German philosopher Ernest Bloch's article, Non-Synchronicity and the Obligation to Its Dialects. Enid is stuck in the past. When she sits down with her parents, who have finally issued a death certificate for her sister decades after the disappearance, and attempt to move on from her loss, Enid doesn't accept it. Enid's struggle isn't one of just dealing with loss, but a struggle to fit into her era, her temporal reality. She wages a war against the video nasties as a way to protect her nation from evil, from horror that she has experienced. Bloch's theory of non-synchronicity deals with socioeconomic factors in the isolation of individuals, or even entire economic classes, in different temporalities that, due to their place in society, fail to fit into modernity. Enid's place out of time comes from a failure to reckon with the time she lives in, the changes of a new era. Her endeavor against the passage of time given form in her attempts at saving her country from this new threat, which is just art. She is a reactionary. Enid wants to return home, to the home where her sister was, where her family was happy, and away from the perceived threats and the friction of living in the present. Bloch's article, written during the rise of Hitler in Germany to try to explain people's draw to the Nazis' right-wing views, looks at the middle class's reason, writing, "An immiserated middle class wants to return to pre-war conditions when it was better off. As I spoke about with the fascist ultra-nationalist palingenesis, it is a return of earlier times." Bloch writing that, in the city, superstructures that seemed long overturned right themselves again and stand still in today's world as whole medieval city scenes. Here is the tavern of the Nordic blood, there the castle of the Hitler Duke, yonder the church of the German Reich, an earth church in which even the city people can feel themselves to be the fruit of the German earth and honor the earth as something holy, as the confessio of German heroes and German history. To draw a line connecting dots of trauma, the immiserated post-World War I middle class of Germany, the feeling of loss and being lost that Germans felt in that post-war period, can be analogous to what Enid felt after losing her sister. Her work as a censor allows her to crusade against the perceived debauchery invading her nation. She works rigorously in a superstructure that upholds outdated morals, the Church of Lost Morals, using Bloch's metaphor. This results in the same drive towards temporal displacement. After accidentally killing a somewhat deserving sleazy producer, Enid infiltrates the movie set of the sequel to the film that highly resembled the loss of her sister, looking for Alice, the woman which she now wholeheartedly believes is her little sister. Posing as an actress, she meets the director, the big villain in her view, telling her,
"People think that I create the horror, but I don't. Horror is already out there, in all of us. It's in you."
When Enid goes to film her scene, she isn't acting. Everything in front of her is taken at face value. The big man with the villainous face is evil incarnate, not the normal guy that is actually friends with Alice Lee. Alice isn't acting, but genuinely pleading for her life, in Enid's view. Enid doesn't see the cameras or the boom mic. This is real to her, and she needs to destroy evil and save her sister. She kills the actor and decapitates the director, all the while Alice screams and the film crew behind her stand in disbelief. Terrified, Alice runs from her, and Enid gives chase. After Enid catches up in a slick of mud in the forest, Alice tells Enid they are not sisters. Unable to accept reality, repeating,
"You have to be out, please. You have to be out."
To herself, sobbing, Enid disconnects further from reality. She presses play on a TV remote. Next, we see Alice/Nina returning to Enid, smiling and telling Enid, "Let's go home." We see Alice/Nina in the car with Enid, sun shining, blue sky, and a cheery color grading that evokes the color version of The Wizard of Oz. Over the radio is an announcement that all the video nasties have been banned from England, and that crime has dropped to 0%. The picture breaks for a moment, Alice screaming out the window. They arrive at their home, Enid presenting her found little sister to her family with a big smile. Her home looks exactly like the cover of a VHS she was looking at earlier. The picture breaks again, Alice begging for help from Enid's parents, before they all look at her in horror. And then the picture is fixed, Enid turning to the camera with a big smile. Enid did all she could to make the past that she was stuck in come back, to return home to that loving family, everyone together and happy again. The country is safe from the contagious evil in the video nasties. Enid is no longer alone in time. She doesn't have to change, grow, deal with the past or the changes of the present, because what has passed has now come home. Censor's nostalgia is one for a small moment in time in a child's memory, the loss of that time being inevitable, but arriving too early, and therefore bringing forward a reactionary longing to the moment which, as an adult, manifests in an attempt at saving society's soul from evil. In contrast, the 2021/2022 film Landlocked is a deeply personal form of nostalgia. The film was set in writer-director Paul Owens' childhood home. It uses footage from his family's real home movies, and features him and most of his family playing themselves. The story starts with a video that the father of the family recorded to be sent to his sons after his death, stipulating that the family home is to be demolished once he passes. Driven by this news, protagonist Mason returns to the house before it is destroyed, to remember. For the first day, he is simply reminiscing in this decayed space. Overgrown and dilapidated, the house gutted of nearly every object that marks what it once was, save for the faded outline of a picture on a wall, or the sparse furniture that is now covered in sheets. There is also his father's video camera and equipment, hidden away in a closet that Mason never knew of. Playing with the camera one day, recording the river beside the house, Mason discovers that the camera can see into the past, an eye through time. What begins as resembling the reflective nostalgia that Svetlana Boym wrote about starts to become more like the previously discussed restorative nostalgia. Again, the two nostalgias are more like tendencies than clear black and white delineations. The first couple of days Mason is in the house, you can see his longing, the side of nostalgia, algia, that represents the restorative type. He stares at sights of his childhood, the broken deck that used to have a pool beside it. He sits on the covered family couch in the living room, and of course he sleeps in his childhood room. You can nearly understand what he's thinking, the consideration of how it was in the past, and the reality of the present, a soft acceptance. Reflective nostalgia cherishes shattered fragments of memory and temporalizes space. Reflective nostalgia reveals that longing and critical thinking are not opposed to one another, as effective memories do not absolve one from compassion, judgment, or critical reflection. In a scene where Mason is smoking on the deck with his brother Paul, Mason says,
"It's weird Dad not being here."
Acknowledging that things are different now, and that it will now always be this way. Mason's reflections on his past are quickly mutated into something else once he begins using the video camera. When he first realizes what it can do, he happily watches his past self and his brothers kicking a ball around in the backyard with their father. But then he starts recording what he sees onto film. The house in this film is a character. To Mason, it is clear that it is one of the last connections he has to his dad. The empty rooms are portals that bring him back to memories of being with him. It is a way for his father to linger just a while longer before the demolition. But the house is already a shell of what it was. Plants overtake the property. Insects have claimed the house as theirs. Turkeys run wild in the yard. The representation of nature's encroachment on the house is central to the film, present throughout. It reveals an anxiety about the inevitable. When the house is gone, there will be nothing left. The property will become the home of nature, grass growing over the foundation where the house once sat, a place for different life. When it is gone and replaced, there will no longer be a tangible space to tie to memory, no return possible. The last connection Mason has to his father faded into a forest, so Mason begins archiving. His mission of building a monument to his past through videos of what is already gone begins. He starts recording every moment, any little slice of life that he can. Bookcases fill with tapes, easily more than 100. He works into the night, almost as though it is his duty to preserve these memories, to keep them from fading away. This is where his reflective nostalgia starts tending towards restorative. Nostalgia is an ache of temporal distance and displacement. Restorative nostalgia takes care of both of these symptoms. Distance is compensated by intimate experience and the availability of a desired object. Displacement is cured by a return home. Never mind if it's not your home. By the time you reach it, you will have already forgotten the difference. What drives restorative nostalgia is not the sentiment of distance and longing, but rather the anxiety about those who draw attention to historical incongruities between past and present, and thus question the wholeness and continuity of the restored tradition. Mason's nostalgia is not of the full-blown nationalistic flavor like what has been previously discussed, but still trends towards the restorative type, as he is in a way trying to restore his past, or at least preserve what is already lost. Mason searches for relief from his longing and his anxiety of losing the past by making it easily available. The VHSs he records are the desired object. His return home is literal, but it is most certainly not his home anymore. The incongruities between past and present is the nature that surrounds him, highlighting the disparity between the present and his childhood. Mason constructs this archive of the past to erect a lighthouse in memory for his father, his childhood, and the house. But in creating this monument, he's trying to re-establish the past as something concurrent with his current place in time, trying to capture the past so that he may stay with it. Time starts to leak. Mason begins to see or sense things that he shouldn't after he sees a charred figure look at him through the camera lens. Through time. After an air vent blasts a cloud of dust into his face, the dust never leaves his hair. The camera is broken, and insects are found inside. He tosses and turns in bed, almost in agony. Voices from the past assail him when he tries to sleep through the night. The last thing that was taped, the footage of the charred figure, inexplicably turns into footage of his father dying. Mason starts seeing through time with his bare eyes, seeing his older brother as a child, crying, and even himself from just a couple days earlier. He wanders outside and seems to leave tracks through time, in the snow of the past.
Somebody's been back here.
Mason starts to exist in between time. In a sense, it is what he wants, but Mason also knows it isn't right. After his breakdown, he buries the camera, another piece of his father lost, and washes himself clean in the nearby river. But it's already too late. As he gets ready to leave the house on the day of the demolition, he takes a small backpack of things from his childhood room and just one of the tapes that he recorded over the past few days. About to leave, he sees both of his brother's cars parked out front, but no sign of them, just turkeys encroaching on the yard. He turns back into the house to look for them. The camera was unburied. Mason only finds the sounds of home videos coming from air vents, leading him to crawl into one. He crawls through the veins of the house until he sees Paul through a grate, eyes locked onto a TV. Mason continues, seeing his other brother, Seth, similarly transfixed. Mason keeps crawling. The metal of the vent has become dirt. Dirt becomes metal again, and Mason comes to an exit. It is the room where his father recorded that posthumous video, and there is his dad, sitting on the couch watching a tape of Mason as a newborn. Mason sits with his dad, finally returning to his side. A peaceful, comfortable smile on his face, before the demolition begins, collapsing the room as Mason and his brothers become another memory to be lost. Mason was so close to moving on from his nostalgia, realizing his intrusion into the past and trying to move on. But his fate seemed to already be decided, the dust from the demolition clinging to him before it happened. That itch for the past drew him deeper into the house, into the vents. His father wanted his sons to move on. That is why the house was to be destroyed. But Mason refused his father's wishes, choosing to be buried with him. If you can't resurrect the past, die with it. Become it. There are hints of what Mason does as a being outside of time, what he became after death. There is a scene where Mason is shown archiving videos, but our view is through a camera recording him, handheld and moving almost as if it's trying not to be caught. The video camera was dug up at the end, once Mason went back into the house. A reading of this is that Mason unburied the camera to continue his work of recording the past, doing so only for the sake of it, only the function of building that nostalgic image aimlessly. Mason exists only in literal memories, only able to voyeuristically view what is already past and record it for the sake of the memory's continuation. A continuation for no one. Landlocked and Censor are both about people that cannot move on from the past. One is driven to a moralistic mission, the other is so entrenched in the past that he gets stuck in it over the present. They are two stories where the nostalgia is deeply personal to the characters, revealing that an over-attachment to what has passed can be destructive to the present, or even the future. Instead of drowning in the past, one must try not to forget the present. Both characters end up trending towards a reconstructive nostalgia. Boehm writes that reflective nostalgia is called so because reflection suggests new flexibility, not the re-establishment of stasis. The focus is about a mediation on the passage of time, savoring details and memorial signs, perpetually deferring homecoming itself. It isn't about returning home, but using the yearning for the past in constructive ways, promoting critical thinking about lived experience. Reflective nostalgia is for the person living in the present, not the person who longs to rebuild a lost home.
The past is made of static images, distorted memories, demented nostalgia. This, the present, with all its possibilities, innumerable hits and misses, is far superior. It is a living organism.
As the past constantly collects behind us, there will always be something to look back to. Nostalgia will always be a fact of the human experience, an indelible tendency of our minds, giving great reason for continued tendance of the grave that is the past. Visits of reflection, maintenance of the history written in stone, and watchfulness against grave robbers. For if our nostalgia, our pasts are left to weather the elements, they will be eroded, be changed. Fascists have and will again use your nostalgia for their agenda, wielding fear of the different, fear of the new, attempting to recreate an infinite moment of false memories based on impossible return. Passive, thoughtless yearning is ready to be appropriated by any vulture that slinks through that door left ajar, and the works that uncritically encourage that yearning in the present let the forces of the present shape that image of the past, the common understanding of a time, into whatever advantages them. Return to a home long gone is futile, leaving only the possibilities of an undead, rotten sort to be recreated, often supplanting any reflection catalyzed by nostalgia that would bring real growth or comfort. To beware the perils of nostalgia is to be in control of your own past. As capital continues to ravage our world, the past is either erased or molded. Rivers disappear, but reproductions of high-grossing films don't. Mountains are torn open, strip-mined for anything of value, and left with scars open to the sky, leaching toxins into groundwater. The 1974 song Magic by Pilot is being used to sell you Ozempic. Fascists have built concentration camps in America, order incompetent and idiotic military police to be let loose on the populace. Pointless wars of aggression are carried out internationally, the consent of which was manufactured under the ideology of making America great again. As we drown in nostalgia, we are sated. giving up any sort of decency or morality, beliefs, any avenue to the new, any possibility for liberation from subjugating forces, the weight of which is so immense and all-encompassing, it feels as though there is no hope for change, all to live in that past where it was believed to not exist for just a second longer, even if it costs us everything. Drowning in the past until we yearn for this current moment after it is gone, nostalgic for a time when something could have been done, something could have been made to be better. The present is better than a misremembered past or an idea of the future because it is real. You are here and you have agency, as inconsequential as it may feel right now. It is something. Do not let your past be used against you. Take it back from those who wish to instrumentalize it. Reflect on your lived experience and grow from it. Let it give you energy to face today. Yearn for the now. Embrace the nostalgia of what made you, and refuse the hand that shapes a collective past.
Like, comment, and subscribe.